Hello, welcome to the second video on learning Flutter together. So in the first video, I went through an introduction of this course, and I showed you Andrew's GitHub, where it's public. Everyone can go through the code, and you can purchase his course. And I'm not sharing the whole course content, but I will go through things that I have learned and to share my thoughts and my own code. So we went through the starter project overview, and then he talked about how to use the widget inspector in the dev tool. Basically, when you open the VS Code, you can either click this one for in widget inspector. Here's the app that we are already running. I made it very small, so you can use this button, toggle selected widget tool. Basically, let's say you want to see how the search works. Oh, what did I press? Maybe let me do this again. On search button, it's supposed to be highlight. Yeah, it's not always working as I expected. Maybe my screen is overly small, but it's supposed to be when you select a widget, and you can see which widget it was, and it will show you on the screen. I should place this. For example, this will show you this is an icon inside a row where this widget is a customized widget called product average rating, and it is here in the code. Product average rating is a widget, and we have a row with a gap, text, another gap, and text. Easy. And the product string name is from the product model dot average rating to string and fixed. Great. And this text means product the number of rating. If it's 1, we see 1 rating, otherwise we see how many ratings. And this one has 2 ratings. I'm curious how we get this data, because it should be coming from leave a review. When I press a review, great, submit. Yeah, it's not implemented yet because this is a starter project. So let's continue. So the next lesson will be the UX design principle, where he talked about composition and a small widget class. I already watched the video. Basically, it's you can find these links in the Flutter decode Flutter, where basically it's to reuse our code to create as much widget as possible instead of a method to return a widget. And he makes sure most widgets are less than 100 lines of code, which is really good. In the company I'm working with, we have huge files. We have some files like 1,000 lines of code. Some widgets are really big, and no one's doing the refactor. I want to do, but they say don't do it. Or they think it's not a priority. There's just a lot of more other tasks to do. So, but it's not a good practice. So it's really useful to keep each class shorter and reuse as much as possible. I always refactor to make code clean and easy to read. And in this section, which is about useful widget for responsive design, and as I mentioned, I will watch the video on
iPad. In the previous
iPad.
lessons, I recommended that you take a look around and make yourself familiar with the code base. That advice still stands, but in this lesson, I want to focus on responsive design and give you a bit more insight about how.
Yeah, often if you keep the page open, it gets stuck and I have to restart.
This common widgets folder in the project. So let's start with responsive center. Responsive center, responsive scrollable card, and responsive two-column layout.
So we talk about in the, we make it a bit bigger. So in the source code, we have common widget, and these widgets, there are some are named as responsive center, responsive scrollable, responsive two-column layout. Very interesting. So in my job, I worked a lot on the responsive design. It's a lot of work because we have a very complicated app, much more complex UI than this one, where we need the app to display both on mobile and the web. Yeah, it's a lot more work. And this one, we will see how he implemented these.
And they can all be found inside this common widgets folder in the project. So let's start with responsive center. And just to give you a very quick idea about what this widget is about, we can select the first item on this list and navigate to the product page. And from here we can select this option to leave a review. And this takes us to this simple screen where we can leave a review for the product. And as you can see, these three widgets are laid out vertically using a column. And if we increase the size of our window, we can see that the contents expand horizontally up to a certain size. But after that, the content width remains fixed, and these widgets are centered horizontally and don't grow anymore as we increase the window size.
Right.
And this is accomplished using this responsive center widget that we can configure with a max content width property, along with some padding and a child widget. And if we take a look at the build method, we can see that it uses a size box to limit the maximum width of each child. And in turn, this is placed inside a center widget. And the reason this layout works as intended has to do with the concept of loose constraints and tight constraints. And if you want to learn more about this, you can check the notes in this lesson. So let me show you how we are using the responsive center widget in this page. And to do that, we can copy the responsive center class name, and then we can open the search panel in the sidebar by pressing Shift-Command-F, and then we can paste this here.
Okay. So basically, when you expand the widget, you see the bar stays the same, which is expanding. We want the button to the very left and very right. But in the middle, you don't want the image to be too big, right? And everything in the center. We have similar designs, but we did a slightly different way. So a maximum strings equals breakpoint.desktop. This is, I believe, it's a new. Oh, I thought it enum. It's a class with a static value. For desktop, we use this. For tablet, but how do you determine it's desktop or tablet? You have to hard code in each one. This is all. I guess this is default value. When you use this, you can. If you use widget. And it showed how to where this is used. For example, it's used in account screen, and in this case, we use the default screens where it's a desktop, and we add paddings. the child is user data table. So center everything. I use the layout builder with a maximum constraint. So basically, I guess it can achieve the same thing. Because you have the maximum breakpoint. I guess the center widget will center everything. My question is, the breakpoint dot desktop you see is 900, right? So that's maximum. Then list will be able to expand. We want list to be 900. Alternatively, you can use the layout builder as well. You say the maximum of the child will be let's say 80%, 70% of the total width available, and then if the total width is smaller and you use the smaller value, you use the math function to use whatever value is smaller. Let's continue. So he was talking about you can use the search feature. You can click this one as well. Yeah, and search for this widget, which it's the same, and you see where it's used. Is it? This is for you. One result. Why it's only showed one usage? If you click command, hold command, and open, you can get the same thing. Shift command F. Let's continue.
And all the usages of this widget. And the one we want is this responsive center that is used inside this live review screen.dart.
This one.
And as we can see, this widget is made of a scaffold and a standard app bar. And inside the body, we use this responsive center widget, passing the live review form widget, which is defined down here as a child. And what is quite interesting is the breakpoint.tablet value that we pass to the max content width argument. And this is known as a layout breakpoint because it results in a layout that behaves in a certain way up to a given threshold and differently for values above that threshold. And if we open the definition of this breakpoint class, we find that I have defined two separate breakpoints called desktop and tablet with values of 900 and 600 points respectively. And a good place to see both breakpoints in action is the product page that we can see over here. And if we make this window bigger, we can see that we are using the desktop breakpoint to lay out the product image and product details side by side. And instead we are using the tablet breakpoint to show the list of reviews. So feel free to use the search panel and explore all the places where I've been using this responsive center widget. And in addition to the responsive center widget, I have also created a sliver equivalent version of it called responsive sliver center, which I use in places where I have a custom scroll view made of multiple slivers. And as an example of this, I can search for product screen.dart and open this file, which contains the product screen widget that represents this page. And if we scroll down in the build method, we can find out that it uses a custom scroll view, and this contains a responsive sliver center with the product details, along with the product reviews list, which internally uses a sliver list widget. And in this case, it's necessary to use slivers, because on this page, I want this area to be scrollable. And we won't spend any more time talking about slivers, because building UIs is not the focus.
So product screen, it's at least one used for product screen. And we can see here. And this one we will have scaffold, app bar, and body with custom scrolling view. The product screen will be the main screen, right? And
this course. But if you want to learn more about them, you can check the resources in this lesson. Next up, we can get back to our sidebar and we can open this responsive scrollable card file. And the responsive scrollable card widget is a widget that builds upon the responsive center widget that we have just reviewed. And on top of that, it adds a single child scroll view to make the content scrollable vertically, along with some padding and a card inside it. And this is used as a parent of this child widget that is passed as an argument. And one place where this widget is in use is in the registration page that you can reach by selecting the shopping cart icon. And then you can click on the checkout button at the bottom. And this opens up this registration page, which is just a simple form where you can enter some text. And one thing that you can notice is that if I make this window very small vertically, then the content inside becomes scrollable. And this is particularly important on mobile, where we need to use the on-screen keyboard to type and the vertical space is reduced. And in cases like this, then responsible scrollable card becomes very useful. And finally, there is one more responsive widget that I want to cover, and this is called responsive to column layout. And one example uses.
So he's talking about this one, and where it's reused in multi places. I believe, for example, email sign-in or address screen where there will be text field, and you tap your keyboard on mobile, the keyboard will pop up and screen will become very small, and you will easily get the overflow error, error. So so he added a single child scrolling view with this responsive center, and added some padding, and the card with each other. Very simple widget. Okay.
This widget is inside the product page over here. Now, this widget is more complex than the other ones because what it does is to show two widgets side by side if the screen is wide enough, but flips into a vertical layout if there isn't enough horizontal space. And this is accomplished by retrieving the maxed width using a layout builder and checking it against a given layout breakpoint to decide if we should arrange the child widget inside a row or a column. And in order to make this widget customizable, I've also provided all these main and cross-axis alignment properties that are passed to the corresponding arguments of the row and column widgets inside the build method. And I've also defined some flex factors that are used inside these flexible widgets over here. And again, a good example of this is the product page, where we have a product image and product details side by side. But these become stacked vertically if there isn't enough space. So if you want, feel free to do a project-wide search of this widget and see where it is used. In summary, we have reviewed 3 different responsive widgets that I created for the most common use cases where we need a responsive layout.
Mention about okay. So he talks about going to this one, and in product screen, this is one product screen, you can see, and if the screen is small, it's a vertical, and if it's big, it became a horizontal with a row of 2 child. That's pretty straightforward, right? So it's based on the constraint of maximum width. For this page, the maximum width is the screen.
In this project. So a good exercise for you to do would be to navigate through the different pages, and for each page with a responsive layout, try to guess which of these responsive widgets is used, and then verify if you were right by looking at the code and inspecting the app using the dev tools. And if you want, you're completely free to copy these widgets and use them in your own apps. And if there is one thing that I'd like you to take away from this lesson, is that in many cases, you don't need a third-party package to do responsive design, and you can often create your own and have full control over your code.
Yeah.
By the way, before we move on, I want to point out that making apps responsive is not only about making sure that they look okay on different screen sizes. In fact, there are many considerations that go into making apps truly adaptive. And one of them is what happens when the user changes the default system font size. For example, here I have the same app running on iOS, and if I open the settings, I can go to accessibility and then display and text size, larger text, and here I can enable the larger accessibility size, and then I can increase the font size to a very large value. And if I get back to the app at this stage, then you'll find many places where the text doesn't scale correctly. So once again, making the app fully adaptive is not the purpose of this course, and we will focus on other topics instead. Though if you want to learn more about this, I recommend checking this page on the Flutter documentation. And you can also find some additional links in the notes for this lesson. Alright, so let's continue on the next lesson.
Okay, I made a base speedy to be more faster, so we already here, right? Yes. So what he was talking is, first we don't need third-party responsive package, which I agree, and I worked a lot on UI and responsive design in my own company, and we don't use any third-party package. I tried some, but it wasn't good. So it's not that hard to achieve, but it's a lot of work. And then he mentioned about if user makes the text big, screen text big, and we easily get overflow into some apps. For example, if it's very big on a mobile app screen, it may not fit. We will get errors. One of the way you can do, there's a setting in the code where you can add medium query to set a fixed font scalable factor, where no matter user increase their font size, the app does not increase. So you can do that if you prefer your app only work on a certain font size. So that's all good. And he mentioned about he had a lot of link here. Let's see. Layout breakpoint. Oh, these are the code. Flutter widget and basic responsive layout. I believe it's his own links, but there's also official resources. Somehow I don't see the resources where he shared, but in the Flutter dive there's a lot of resources for responsive design. It's almost finished. Let's see the localization, where you can make your app for different language. And I tried once for my app, not in my current company, for a few other apps. It's very good, very durable. Let's see how he implements. There are, I guess, many different ways on doing things. So let's see which way he used.
In this lesson, I want to talk about localization. And this is an important topic if you want your app to support multiple languages. And this is one of those things that you should really plan out and design from the start. Because if you ignore this and try to add localization at the end of the project, then you'll have a lot more work to do. Luckily, any project that was created with a Flutter skeleton template is already configured for localization by default. And once the basic configuration is done, you'll find a folder called localization, where you can add an IRB file, which is nothing more than a JSON file with key value pairs representing all the localized strings that you want to use. Where you can add and a folder. Basic configuration is done, you'll find a folder called localization, where you can add an IRB file, which is nothing more than a JSON skeleton template is already configured for localization by.
So he said, use Flutter 𝒂𝒑𝒑𝒐 skeleton will enable localization by default. I didn't know that. Let me see. did he have any add? Right, so since Flutter 2.5, we can use a new skeleton app tag. Okay, so this will be generated and set up in. To learn more, these are the resources. How to read localized string outside of the wiki. Oh, yeah, right. Let's see. Let's continue.
And once the basic configuration is done, you'll find a folder called localization where you can add an IRB file, which is nothing more than a JSON file with key value pairs representing all the localized strings.
So in the source localization, localization, where this is already added, and here is a string hard-edit code. This is just a method to get a string, so I believe here is all the code. Somehow my screen is all white and he has different color. Maybe I didn't have some package is missing, so the JSON file is not that pretty. But basically, instead of in your code writing text my shop, you say something dot app title, and then you add title here. This is the same as the code base in my current company, where we have a large file for each could leave your review. But for a big company, like this file can be huge, and sometimes it's hard to name this. We already have a lot of messy code over time, where you see, oh, button, primary button, then you have another secondary button, and then another customized button. Then when you use, you may forget. Or sometimes we already added this email, this string means email, and somewhere in the bottom, another dev came and add another email key, right? So they can say email text or whatever. Because if you have a duplicated text, the app, it won't show error, but it's going to make the file really large. But it's still useful to manage these. And what we also use is on Firebase remote config. So on a text, if you want to change anything, and you can quickly change on Firebase, like remote configuration, right? Instead of changing your code and then launch a new release, which takes a lot more time. So that's a benefit. Let's see how he's doing the translation
that you want to use in the project. And when you start a new project with a Flutter skeleton template, then this file only contains a couple of values. But I've already gone through the process of adding all the localized strings that we may need in this project. Now, the process for adding localization is already explained in the official documentation, and I've also written this tutorial, which presents a simplified approach that you can follow in your own apps. So if you want to learn more, you can read through this tutorial. And the bottom line of this is that once you've set everything up, you can type app localization of context to access all the localized strings that you need and use them in your widgets. However, I feel that dealing with localization at this point in time would make it more difficult for you to work out which strings are used in which widgets. And for now, I think it's important that you are able to find your way around the codebase without having to worry about localization. For this reason, I've decided to leave hard-coded strings inside the widgets, and I hope that this will make life easier for you. As an example of this, we can open the Leave Review screen widget that we have already seen in the previous lesson, and we can locate this string that says Leave a Review. And as you can see, there is one small caveat, and that is that every time you encounter a hard-coded string, you see that it has this .hard-coded suffix at the end. And the reason that I've added this is that if we want, we can do a...
Okay, so it's talking about in the review page, source. Review page. Not the action. Oh, not. It's a different page for here. Okay, this is an example. It said we use hard-coded text just to make the project easier, but in production app, many companies may do things differently and click hard-coded.
Wide search for .hardcoded and find all the places in the code where there are strings that need to be localized later. And find all the places in the code where...
So, I guess the advantage of using this is on the search bar, and you can search for hard-coded. Yeah. Oh, okay. Wait, let me pause the video. It's almost finished for today. Can you give me 2 minutes?
Strings that need to be localized later. And if you want to find out how this is defined, you can go to the definition, and here you can see that I've defined an extension on the string type, and all I do inside is to define this getter variable that does nothing other than return this, which represents the string itself. So once again, this is just a placeholder that doesn't modify the string in any way, and it is useful to locate all the hard-coded strings in the project. So once again, we won't be dealing with localization at this stage so that we can focus on more important things. But I just wanted to include this lesson to tell you about it, because localization is fairly simple and you shouldn't ignore it in your own apps. Okay, so this wraps up this first section of the course, and I feel that even though we haven't written any code yet, we've already covered some interesting stuff. For example, how to use the dev tools to more quickly get familiar with a new code base. And we have talked about composition and its importance when building reusable widgets. And we have also seen that we can go a long way in making our apps responsive without having to rely on third-party packages. And like I said before, I encourage you to explore this code base on your own and see if you can understand how it all fits together from a high-level point of view. However, if there is anything that is not clear at this stage, then don't worry, because we'll spend a lot of time working on this project and I'll make sure to explain things as we go along. In fact, in the next section, we will talk about navigation and migrate this project from Navigator 1.0 to GoRouter. And this will be a great opportunity to understand how all these screens are connected together.
Cool. You okay? My daughter. Cool. So so on the app here, we finished the module 1. Great, congratulations. So for next video, we are going to explore the module 2, which is this part with GoRouter. I never used GoRouter, and in my company we use another widget, another library called 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂, which is also good, but I've heard a lot of good things about GoRouter, so I'm very excited on how to implement this. And thank you very much. Bye bye.